Hello.
Hello.
Uh,
Today's level is elephant three.
three.
Oh,
I think three is fair.
I think that's fair too.
Today we're talking about
The
six,
the birds and the bees.
the birds and the bees, the very taboo human sexuality. Interesting that it's still considered such a taboo to talk about sex, especially for women. But we'll get into that. Do you have a definition?
Yes, I do. Definition that we have today is human sexuality is the way people experience and express themselves sexually. This involves biological, erotic, physical, emotional, social, or spiritual feelings and behaviors. Because it's a broad term which has varied with historical context over time, it lacks a precise definition.
Precise. Isn't that crazy? I think that's the first word that I've ever heard not have a precise definition because I stick by this. Sex and sexuality is fluid.
Yes. It encompasses a lot. It has a lot of different variety, different everything, different things, being sensual, with your sexuality, also all of that. Um, I don't know why it's taboo. I don't know why. I don't know why it's not a natural, it's a normal thing.
Yeah.
It's
I
crazy.
mean, for those that fight against that concept that it's fluid, even the definition couldn't even surmise it because there is no way throughout our stages in life the way that we express and explore our sexual nature develops and is different,
Yeah.
right? I'm not saying that children are, to be sexualized at all, but they have a different concept of what sex and sexuality is, what that expression of it is. And as you grow and you start developing crushes and finding out like your body starts developing, right? And now you're outwardly showing things and feeling things in your body that you
Yeah.
didn't feel. Seeing, you know, your crush doesn't just make your heart go flutter, flutter, it makes other parts go flutter, flutter. Yeah. So that's very interesting. Sex isn't to me now what it was to me in my 20s or in my teens.
I
How
mean,
about for you?
well, I was gonna ask you, you were taught about this when you were young, were you? Like,
Oh, yeah. I
see,
was really little. I was like in elementary school.
See, I wasn't. My parents never taught us about any of that. And the schools we went to or whatever never had sex ed education classes. So,
Really?
uh-huh.
Wait, this is further getting into because I know that there's a lot of people that can relate to that experience. So like, and in Latino, like in that culture, in our culture, it's not something that's talked about
Exactly.
openly.
No,
Well, my mom was a doctor,
exactamente.
so yeah. So she was like, okay, listen, we gotta talk. Because in my mom's mind, she wanted me to learn the real crap, like not from another kid my age that has pieced together information and I'm getting some diluted kind of um, understanding of what sex and sexuality is. And not so much sexuality, but sex. My mom at a very early age, and it wasn't the birds and the bees. It was very straightforward, which very much normalized it for me. Didn't make it a scary act or an ugly act.
Yeah, like something wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, which is another thing that I fear happens in our communities. We paint this picture to our kids in the first kind of like brush with understanding of what sex is, that it's something bad
Yeah.
or negative, and it creates shame around it. And we've discussed what shame does.
This whole fantasy that it needs to be special or, magical in some way.
I mean, that's lovely, but
That's not
doesn't
It's not reality. I mean, it should be important and it should be with the person that you are ready with, but that 100% doesn't happen all the time.
No. And I feel like instead of perpetuating that has to be the case, that's the ideal.
Right.
I would love, I was very fortunate, you know what I mean? In my first time, it was very special. Maybe not to the degree that I would have imagined it, but like, yeah, um, I ended up marrying the person, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but that's not everybody's experience.
Right.
And if it's a less than stellar experience, I wish that what we would promote is like the tools to cope. That maybe that wasn't the best, but that doesn't mean that's not a blueprint for every other experience you'll have.
Right. And also, like, obviously, as you get older now, when you're a teenager, I mean, if you want, that's fine, whatever. I mean, but as a teenager or an adult or now, like, not perpetuating that um, experimenting or wanting to explore different options on your sexuality or your on sex, it's wrong, or that it's you shouldn't. I think
Yeah.
that should be an open conversation for that too. Again, like we were about to say, in schools,
Yeah.
like my schools didn't have any of that. I think it was like what, sixth grade or seventh grade was the last time here in the States, but other than
Wow.
that, like 9, 10, I don't remember having any sex ed classes at all. And if it was always like about the male and never about the female and how, that that world,
I
about
remember this teacher, and she sticks out to me because she was such a hippie and I loved her. Miss Candela. I went to Kinloch Park Middle School. It was the first time I had an actual sex ed class. And like in this class, like, and I hope that this doesn't get this damn school in trouble because that would be so stupid. I don't even know if they do these classes anymore. And I hope they do because this was not damaging to the students. If anything, she probably prevented a lot of people from getting pregnant or from getting STIs. But like she taught us how to put a condom on a banana and
mm,
she demystified for us in front of our face, the concept of like if a guy tells you that he's too big for a condom, she was like, she took out a big ass shovel and put it on the shovel. And like it was silly and we all giggled and oh my God, sex.
mm,
But it took an adult who talked about it like she was talking about gardening, you
right,
know, talking to us about it like that for us to realize that, yeah, it's all fun and delicious and lovely, but that there's repercussions to it,
right,
right? So, like, if we have bad tests on grades, she's like, don't have sex with these people. These are the people you don't want to have sex with because they're gonna they're gonna mess you up. And I find it, really interesting that parents take issue with their kids learning about sex in schools. You're not willing to have the conversation. Let another adult take care of it. But let's
right,
make sure that it's proper education, not
right.
basura. Because there's been times where in schools they were teaching if you have sex, you'll die,
Just to
because,
scare them.
just to scare them instead of actually doing the job. I actually have a chart here where it says sexuality education is not universal. Countries with education policies that guide the delivery of life skill based HIV and sexuality education according to international standards. Primary schools, percentage reporting in countries. There's a lot more schools around the world in primary, secondary, and teacher training providing this kind of education. But there's still a lot that don't, as clearly because your school didn't have it. I haven't heard any of my younger cousins say that they had this. I had to wait till I was in college, going to Miami-Dade College, to actually take a real in-depth human sexuality course that blew my damn mind.
Yeah, my nieces don't have it in their schools either, and they're already in 10th and 7, I think. So yeah.
Right. And it's so much more than just like the logistics of okay, This is how you have intercourse. Besides the fact that I also think it's fair to share homosexual and heterosexual experiences in
Right.
these classes, right? Because the fact is everybody's experience is not the same. And in discovering these developmental sexual experiences, you can't talk about sex without talking about sexual orientation.
Right.
And our ties to certain sex experiences is in thinking that shame, right? If you're just taught boy girl and you're feeling girl girl, right? Or guy guy,
Right.
there's something wrong with me. You then engage thinking that it's different from the experience you've been taught about, and you find a whole slew of other things. That's hard. That has to be on top of the fact that you're dealing with the fact that I am not attracted to what my friends are. You have to now deal with this new layer of, okay, but does it work different? Sex is sex, right? But there's certain things that do work differently.
Right. It's just a whole lot of things when you're growing up and you're a teenager, man. Like you said, sexuality, sex, and then if you do have other problems too, all that just you're a tiny a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, a teenager dealing with all this all at once. If there's no
That's
adult
rough.
here, yeah, it's a lot.
What was like, what was your, like, where did you get your sexual education? Like, where did you learn? Did you have to take it upon yourself?
I took it upon myself, but I did. There was this program that you just reminded me of, that from the nonviolence program that I did go to in my high school, that I joined this program, and they did bring one time a class, like a sex ed class for one time. That was just a one time thing, about preventing HIV and STIs and things like that. But that was it. But yeah, I took it upon myself to learn everything that I wanted to learn, and even the simplest things about your period, things like that. I learned everything upon myself because I had no education anywhere else. So I learned at experiment, and I asked questions to whomever I could, just because I wanted to see other people's perspectives on their lives, on how things
Yeah.
were for them, and just more research. And so to this day, still doing more research, experimenting, and there's no shame in that.
Yeah.
You need to know what you like, what you don't like, what the safe words, the boundaries, all those things encompasses sexuality and sex, and it's just communication, with your
Yeah.
partner, with whomever you're gonna having interactions with. So yeah.
It's true. And that's, you know what? Like, in all of this sex education, I don't think that that's something that is discussed. Communication,
Right.
right? I'm really happy to see it a lot more. It kind of, I'm happy to see it a lot more on social media, and at the same time, it's a little disconcerting that a lot of people that are entering their kind of sexual awakening are gaining. No, it's not. That's really unfair for me to say. I was going to say that they're getting their information from online, but where the hell else are they going to get it? As long as they're making sure that it's coming from like a solid source and not some random chick that decided, I really like sex, so I'm going to talk about it,
Mm.
right? No, there are actual sexual counselors and therapists online that have TikToks, that have Instagrams, and that make it fun, interesting, and engaging and safe to learn about consent, to learn about communication, to learn about um, shaming versus not shaming, right? And to start changing the narrative that it's a solely male driven need,
Right.
right? And also that we're learning that women are allowed to be sexual beings, right? And that um we discovered this, you discovered this, and we talked about it. That when we tried looking for pictures for this segment, a lot of imagery that came up was from the queer community,
Yeah.
right? Which I think is very indicative of a lot of things. A lot of people shame the LGBTQ plus community for being so upfront about their sexuality. But for many years, I feel like it's a way of reclaiming the power because for many years, it's what was killing them.
Exactly.
And nobody was helping and nobody was educating them. So the queer community took it onto themselves to get the knowledge, to get the information and get it out to each other and to heterosexual people who assumed that it couldn't touch them.
Exactly.
Very ignorantly thought couldn't touch them. So yes, they're more open, but it's because it's their way of protecting themselves. I think it's a way of that all of us can take a page from that book and learning that openness and that comfortability and talking about sex, not just with our friends, but with our partners. Because funny enough, a lot of people feel the most shame in discussing sex or sexual past or sexual need with the person you're going to engage with sexually, which is the person you should be most interested in and available to,
Right.
vulnerable to share this kind of information with.
But the whole
Because
shame thing comes into play too.
the
Remember,
the whole what?
shame.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As a woman, as a Latina, like it was there's the assumption that you are caliente, like hot all the time and saucy. And my issue was always like I've had big boobs,
Yeah.
right? And I've had big boobs since I was in middle school. And I was the first one to develop. And there was kind of like a shame in that because everybody had a smaller chest, and here I had big boobs. So I had to wear like extra bras to like strap them down and make them look smaller. And my mom was like, "What are you doing? Te vas a deformar el cuerpo," you know? So it took my mom telling me to snap out of it and stop being ridiculous,
Yeah.
that all those girls were eventually gonna blossom themselves, you know? But that kind of shame happens a lot. And we do it to our kids and we do it to each other of like, if you can't show because your boobs are too big, but you can show just fine.
Because
We've
it's
sexualized all these things beyond need.
right. And that's what was taught to us to do. So then, we just keep doing it. That's
Right.
it.
How do you feel about that? About like this sexualizing of the female body versus the male body versus
Obviously, it's unfair. I mean, why are you sexualizing anybody's body? That's how I feel. Like, nobody's body should be sexualized. But when I growing up, I didn't have to deal with that. I mean, I did to an extent, but it wasn't as prominent as we hear today. You know how the body shaming and things like that. We weren't worried about all that shit back then when we were in high school or in middle school, even. At least I wasn't. We were just worried about TV shows, going outside to play. And now you're a teenager turning 17, 18, and it's like, oh, well, I can't wear this, I can't do this, I can't act this way because a female presenting woman or whatever can't act this way, or you can't wear that because se está enseñando todo. And it's like growing up with these certain words, or like, I know in Puerto Rico when I was growing up, oh no, te puedes poner shorts, you can't, they're too short. Why? Who cares? I'm going outside to play. I
right.
don't care to no one's, pleasure of anybody's eyes. We sexualize. We do it sometimes even without noticing. And I know we've done it before. It's like, oh, that person is, they're hot, or like, wow. And we've talked about
one thing is attraction. That we are sexual beings, eso somos.
Yeah.
So to be attracted is one thing, but to like shame because of a perceived sexual no,
Yeah.
that's where I'm like, it's a very interesting thing. For example, I've been watching this show on Netflix as I do, like, and it hits me every time when I remember that we watch all these high school students on these shows having sex and losing their virginities and having those experiences. Now, mind you, that was not my experience. Like, And I made out with a lot of people. I did all the things in high school, but I don't remember a lot of what I see in these shows being my reality. But I do recognize it being other people's reality in high school.
Yeah.
So it's not that it doesn't happen and that it's wrong. Be so consistently bombarded by it as adults and as teenagers that are currently in that situation, watching it as though maybe that's the expectation. I wonder, I wonder how much of that does inform. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. And that also could be like, oh my gosh, should I be doing that? Maybe the teen is questioning themselves also. It's like,
Right.
should I be doing that? Should I not be doing that? Like,
And the thing is that there's nothing wrong with engaging at a young, like in your teens and that kind of thing, but you don't know your ass from your elbow. And I used to get really annoyed when my mom would tell me that. Like, I know you are coming into your own, you are more grown, but there's a lot of emotional things that you still haven't figured out. So to cope
right,
with that alone and feeling like you can't turn to an adult because you'll be shamed or punished is
right,
is really difficult because you're caught between a rock and a hard place. What you want to do, what your urges are telling you to do that aren't wrong, but not having the kind of tools to cope with it.
yeah, I remember being in high school and like a bunch of girls were pregnant and you were like only like 15, 16. So they will send them to a pregnant school, and to take them out, but they still will go to school with all the other girls who are, with the same people, you know. And then you will never see them again until like a year later and you're like, what the fuck happened?
Really?
Hmm.
That's sad. You
Yeah,
know,
they're.
and you see it, it's because they would take a lot of these girls out of schools because they thought that they were going to be a bad influence on the other.
Hmm.
Todito lo están haciendo.
Right, some just way
Let's
more
let's
people.
not act like, but you're now like, again, added trauma to this person, right?
Right,
They've gotten pregnant, okay, and it's not what they had planned, but they are maintaining the pregnancy. They're going to go through with it. Why are you going to take them out of their one normal
yeah,
kind of, entre comillas, normal experience?
right,
They're friends. You're isolating them more. You're making them believe that they did something wrong.
right.
It was not the best choice, but it was not wrong. It's really difficult. And I can't imagine being a parent in that situation, wanting to be supportive of your child and then getting pushback from other parents and from other kids, you know?
I was unfortunate to have a parent that cared about that subject. I'm very happy that my sister is willing to talk about my nieces about sex and their sexuality. Doesn't matter who you like. If you bring anybody home, just let me know. Whatever the case is. Again, in our time, those people that got pregnant, were they did they have the talk? Probably, probably not. Who knows? Who is no one's fault either. It's just you're
Yeah.
experimenting too, and it happens. But it's just that, yeah, there are consequences sometimes. Now, I'm not saying it's bad consequences because people love children. You have your kid, all of that. But at the same time, it's like a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. It's also interesting because everybody kind of just jumps to sex. Like, okay, penetration, this and that. Nobody talks about masturbation.
No, nobody talks about that. They think it's wrong too.
Right. And so it's like, ooh, the bad word. And self-care is, face masks and rosé. But self-care can also include taking care of yourself,
Right.
you know? Um, but it also is a really beautiful way of exploring your own body, understanding what feels good to you
Exactly. So then you can tell your partner.
so you can share it with your partner. But you also, like, what is our example of what we tend to use on someone else? Well, we know we might like, right?
Right.
So you're gonna give somebody a massage. You're not just gonna like, you're gonna
Right.
do what aquí es donde me duele a mí. So that's where I'm gonna go. Hey, how'd you know? Oh, cause me too. You know? it's the same thing. When you're first like engaging, you want that idea of like, okay, I know this feels nice to me. And it's the conversation, it's the discovery. But
Exactly.
that's what we don't know to have, right? When we don't know what to expect or what sex could be or is. We don't know that it's a discovery and that it could be enjoyed and that it's a ride. It's the get it in.
So many things that deal with just, the passion behind it. Like, again, nothing of this is taught. Like, it's lacking a lot of information.
Yeah. And now we get older and sex takes on a different face
Yeah.
because now sex is not, it gets a little demystified the older we get, especially after we've already had sex. If
Right.
you've been married and divorced, if you've been married for a long time, if you've never been married, have no intention of being, whatever your like romantic uh kind of landscape looks like, sex somehow is lying in there. And we're now in like a time, actually it happened in the 70s too, free love and sexuality was more open. And we go into the time of HIV and AIDS,
Right.
right? Where we start to learn that we need to be cautious
Okay. Yeah.
with our
Protect.
bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're falling back into a time where sexual openness and acceptance of our sexual needs, whatever our orientation may be, is becoming a little bit more in people's face, right? People are reclaiming the word slut to not mean, to not have the negative connotation that it's had before, right?
Right.
For it to just be a word. Because there was that whole idea of the double standard of men can sleep around and do this,
And
but
they're
if a
like,
woman does it, she's a slut.
right.
That's BS. Women are just as capable and able and allowed. That's such a stupid word to have to use, but to explore their sexuality and their sexual needs as much as anyone.
As long as they're being safe and taking precautions and, whatever, hey, more power
Right.
to you. That's it.
To each his own. I mean, there's people that really their joy and their comfortability is in casual sex.
And that's,
They're not hurting you. They're not hurting anybody. They're not even hurting themselves. They tend to be more careful than most people. You know what I mean?
yeah, two consensual adults agreeing, and that's fine.
Yeah. Now, if someone else's experience is different, they're more selective. There is demisexuals. I want to say what I know off the top of my head, but I
Right.
don't want to
But
give a half.
yeah, we want to be politically correct here. We don't want to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Demisexual people only feel sexually attracted to someone when they have an emotional bond with the person. They
Mm-hmm.
can be gay, straight, bisexual, pan, or maybe have uh or may have any gender identity. Meaning again, nothing to do with gender or sexual orientation. The desire is that you want to have some sort of bond, know the person,
Mm-hmm.
have an emotional connection with them before engaging. I know a lot of people like that. They won't even kiss. They won't even
Mm-hmm.
kiss without feeling that kind of connection. And then there's people that do a little bit of both, you know? Like I need to have that like that emotional connection, but today you're real cute. So, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's every kind of mix and mashup. And I think the more that we understand those kinds of things as well is important. No, I
No.
was gonna ask you like what you felt about all the titles and the labels and the things.
What about it?
Like learning about what those different identifiers can be. Like what do you think about that?
The identifiers, like,
Well, because now it's like they jokingly call the LGBTQ plus thing the alphabet mafia, right? But it
Okay.
doesn't just apply to orientation. It
Right.
also applies to sex and romantic dynamic, right?
Mhm.
Where we have all these labels, demisexual, sapiosexual, sachiosexual, um,
Asexual.
asexual. You also have dynamic things. You have swingers, you have non-monogamous versus polyamorous versus monogamous versus open relationships. All these fucking names.
Way too many for me to keep up with.
It's
That's why.
exhausting. But at the same time, I can understand the value of having identifiers like that to kind of find your space
No,
or
of course.
understand things about yourself a little bit more clearly.
Right, because it does feel good. Like I said before, being a non-binary, it feels good when you finally found a label that does fit what the fuck you are or feel or whatever. So yeah, identifiers are great because it does give you that sense of like, oh, I know where I fall into, and then the other people you could connect to in that same label and make more connections that way and learn more about it when there's an actual definition that you could say, okay, I could search this up. I know what the fuck I'm looking for, you know. But if you
Mm.
go to Google and pone people who are attracted to people, but not in, you know, and then you just get lost. So yes, finding that identifier, it's great, but it's just too many to learn. Yo paré, I stopped at God knows where years ago because it's just I'm happy for community and them finding their labels and their titles and whatever, but it's just too many.
Again, yeah, it's very helpful. And I personally am I'm me. And like I know that I have my quirks that can fall into certain umbrellas, right?
Yes.
And it's a very wide umbrella. But we're all like that. We all have that capability and we all have these unique things that make us who and how we are. And when it comes to sex, we all have those unique things that turn us on or turn us off. And that really is only the business of you and whoever's turning you on or off,
Exactly.
however many people that may be.
Right.
That's
That's
your business.
but I this is interesting though because now being obviously 2021 and having all these identifiers and this thing and I wonder how the sex education in schools who are teaching sex because now obviously not every school I wonder
Mm.
how that is playing with LGBT community and sex in
Yeah.
schools about teaching children about you could be this, are you feeling this, are you feeling that, or this, demi a whatever, and then kids learning more about that. So that's also interesting how it's going to play out in
Yeah.
education.
It is very interesting, especially because now things are being talked about more,
More information.
right? So
Yeah.
much more. And now we're having the backup of the support of demystifying mental health,
Oh,
which
that.
we know so much of mental health plays into our sexual experience. There's people
Exactly.
that just can't open themselves sexually because of past traumas, right?
Right.
And once it gets resolved, they're able now to engage, experience, and enjoy
Right.
sexual connection. Um, that being said, there's also like there's things that are more accessible. People are more open about who they are,
Right.
right? Either orientation or dynamics wise, like there's a lot more people being open about having multi-amorous engagement, right? Or connections versus also the kink community
That's
not being so in the shadows anymore, right? The kink community coming out and saying, "Hey, we're here and there's nothing wrong with it." Because it's really easy for a lot of people to kind of um borrow, right?
right.
Um concepts or practices or even wardrobe from the kink community, but not acknowledge it as a viable way of experiencing and practicing sex, right? It gets shamed.
Right.
And the kink community has kind of like taken that back. And they're like, no, 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 wait a minute. Y'all like wearing our holsters, right?
Right.
Y'all like doing this. Or basically, a kink is like what I consider it to be is like something that causes arousal or
Right.
excitement that isn't the quote unquote norm. Okay. And the definition that I have for kink is in human sexuality, kinkiness is the use of non conventional sexual practices, concepts, or fantasies. The term derives from the idea of a bend in one's sexual behavior to contrast such behavior with straight or vanilla sexual. But yeah, so that there's the straight edge or what they call vanilla, which is
Bland.
what we all know. There's nothing wrong with being vanilla or straight laced, but kink is having being turned on by other things. There's people that are turned on by feet. There's people that need.
Uh,
There's a lot of in the kink community. There's leather play. There's people who like impact play, which is being hit,
yeah.
right? And there's people who like doing the hitting, right?
And there's
So,
safe words. Remember that.
and they have safe words. So it's not just like people that are diving into this unknowingly,
Right.
um, which I'm glad that now it's easier for people that have those interests to go and have other people to talk to openly that have more experience so they don't have to live through some scary stuff
Right.
because asphyxiation and things like that are very real in those communities when people try to delve into something that they have no idea and don't take proper measures. So I think it's really important that these conversations are happening more openly.
Yeah,
I'm glad they are.
you reminded me of the swinging. Remember when swinging was what in the 70s? And the
Uh-huh.
swinging used to be a thing, but it was shamed as well. And oh my God, you can't do that. Now they have swinging clubs everywhere.
They
And
do.
people are doing it openly and safely and consensually. And that's beautiful to see that this is being accepted because there's nothing wrong with any of these communities. There's nothing
No,
wrong.
it really isn't.
It's just
And
people being close to
themselves.
it.
If you don't like it, nobody's telling you you have to participate in it.
But you don't have to be negative towards it and make a rally and be like, let's stop it. Like, I don't know, like things like that. It's just ridiculous. Makes no sense.
I always wonder the people that feel so strongly about that. They think that they're doing their part in saving someone else's soul,
The God's work.
that it's God's work. I mean, there's so many other things that God needs you to do. Okay, there's people starving in the street. Okay, that are homeless. Worry about that.
Right?
Worry about that kind of service. You're not doing any kind of service to the Lord in stopping somebody else from living their best consensual life.
Right. It's their
They're
life.
not telling you, come sleep with us. you know?
Be judgmental people out there, regardless, and hateful and racist, homophobic, X, Y, and Z all over the world. And all we could do is, I don't know.
It's really interesting. For my part, before I get into quotey quotes, I wish that the amount of information and education only continues to grow, but that we recognize how much of a disservice shaming and normalizing negative commentary
Mm-hmm.
and negative attitudes towards sex or sexuality, right, is versus how being positive about it or explaining why something can be dangerous, not bad, not wrong, just this can be dangerous if this is like this, especially and this applies to trans women as well, or women, period. um I guess that's why I never separated, because to me,
Yeah, same.
trans women are women. But when I talk about women or female presenting people, massively important because they're the most sexualized body. Women and female presenting have for years had to fight off gazes and stereotypes and felt that they've had to hide parts of themselves in order to be deemed okay in the eyes of the world. It's
Right.
been a little bit easier for men and um,
You have to be more.
male presenting people, and even then, that is now becoming a thing because whereas in the queer community, they are more open in talking about sex. They also about how like in the queer community, it tends to be a bit the opposite that the sexualized body is that of male and male presenting,
Oh yeah.
right? So it's really interesting how that changes with within different communities, but in general, it affects women and female presenting people very differently because it affects their everyday life.
Right. It
It
does.
affects work, it affects how they relate to friends, to family, to other individuals, male or female. I really hope that we keep focusing and narrowing in on how to change that rhetoric. Nobody should feel like they have to hide themselves.
No, not exactly. And the thing is, right now we're only sharing barely 10% of the information that's out there. This is literally not even the full scope of what's out there to share information. But what we do encourage you all to do is educate yourselves. We are so fortunate that we have the internet. Obviously, make sure that the resources are, you know,
Yes.
from a good resource, somebody that, educational wise. But there is so much information out there for all your needs, for everything you need. There are plenty of books you go order, plenty of things you can, you know, read into. It's out there. But the thing is, we need to stop shaming ourselves first. Be like, oh my gosh, should I look up this topic? Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. You know, that's another thing. You need to be okay with yourself and accept yourself for literally who you are, your thoughts and what comes. If you want to learn something, learn it. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being a sexual being, liking sex. If your gender does not mean that you should like sex more or less. Who
Right.
you who you are attracted to doesn't mean you should like sex more or less. However many partners you choose to engage with sexually, romantically, or otherwise, there's nothing wrong with that. All of it is 1,005% valid as long as you are being safe, considerate of yourself and those that you are sharing with, and um also like Truby said, be educated about it, because the more you know about yourself, even especially in the most intimate of moments, right,
Right.
says a lot about you on your day to day. It's not just going to bed, right?
Right.
So power to the people and the sex, just be safe. So I do have Cody quotes.
Quote
The
unquote.
first one I have two from actors, which is funny. So here I have, you can never talk religion on network TV. It makes too many people angry. You can talk about sex. Craig Ferguson. It's true.
That is
On
true.
TV, you can see, you know, people exposing their full naked bodies. You can see people having very true to life simulated sex on TV at all hours of the day and making sexual comments back and forth. But the moment anybody makes any kind of political or religious comment outside of a news station, people lose their shit.
Hell breaks loose, no pun intended.
We need men and women to sit down and talk to each other about sex honestly and openly. That would help us fight AIDS immediately. But our lack of communication is hugely problematic. Emma Thompson. Emma Thompson is an actress who is very well known for being an advocate and an activist um, against in AIDS awareness and AIDS education. And, now we know, you know, men, women, and our non-binary um, siblings to sit, to talk, to have the conversations. Because again, AIDS is not solely something that affects one community. The
Exactly.
ignorance in that is what keeps AIDS a problem in this world.
Exactly.
Now, mind you, STIs are out there. They're a scary thing. Most of them there's cures for, but the things that are killing people nowadays, sexually transmitted diseases that are killing people nowadays, are things like syphilis that should not be a thing.
Right.
Um, but because of the stigma in testing, like babies, if y'all can get yourself excited and want to live your sexual free life,
Go get this.
be wise. Be wise. Because you're not just like potentially putting your own life at risk, you're putting someone else's life at risk, and you don't want that on your hands. Take a damn test. Okay? Out of the Closet is a place that's on US 1. And there's one in
In Florida,
downtown.
in Miami, just
They have them in Texas. They have them everywhere. They have
okay.
them everywhere. And it is an easy place to walk in and get a free HIV test. Planned Parenthood still does tests. Yes, that costs money. But there's free clinics where you can get tested just for HIV and AIDS. But if you have insurance or you have the ability to do a full blood panel, do it. Do it for yourself. Do it for your partners. Nobody's telling you not to live your life how you want to. Just do it safely because for yourself, we care about you, and we care. And in caring about you and yourself, that means looking out for whoever you sleep with. Who
Exactly.
you sleep with, I want y'all to sit with this. I don't remember where I saw it. I will find the article. But you sleep with the last people that your partner slept with in the last 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's something important. That doesn't, I'm not saying that to shame anyone. I'm saying it as point of thought, point of reference. You're sleeping with everyone that that person has slept with last 7 years. The least you could do is just get tested, stay safe, so you can keep enjoying. Sex feels delicious. Nobody is saying otherwise. But there's no need for us to get sick or, affect somebody else's life. And we didn't even get to the conversation about pregnancy, but we know, that that is also a thing, and that our government has way too much say in what happens with a woman's body at this point for us to not um, be cognizant of how those kinds of things affect us. That's what I mean. Like, nos afecta de alguna manera.
Yeah, everything does affect us.
Thank you for translating. And my last quote is from Osho,
Ooh.
uh, poet and philosopher. Um, Tantra says, accept whatsoever you are. You are a great mystery of many multidimensional energies. Accept it and move with every energy with deep sensitivity, with awareness, with love, with understanding. And I think that that applies because like I said, we talked about masturbation. We talked about not just for the sake of knowing how to touch yourself, but like knowing yourself. And Chupi says this all the time. Know yourself. The more you know yourself and you know your energy and what you're seeking, the more you know what to engage and what you can cope with and not. And the decisions are your own and you're true to yourself. without feeling that you're sacrificing for the sake of fulfilling some societal norm about who you should be sexually.
Exactly.
Fuck that.
You said it all. It's true though. Like, do what makes you like, what pleases you, what you like. You come first. Well, no pun intended in that either. But you are you come first in whatever it is, because if you are not okay with it, how is anybody else is gonna be okay with anything that you're doing? And again, learn everything you can. Books still exist, but if your hands held, the internet's out there. There's so much information out there, again, like I said. And for you not to use it is just a waste. um and please don't shame other people for who they are as well, because that's not going to get you anywhere. Obviously, if you're shaming them, is for a reason. Maybe you are wanting to experiment, but you don't know how to. There's always people to talk to. Oh, we're here too. you know
Yeah.
we're down for conversations.
I'm always down for those kinds of conversations. Y'all be surprised how much I know. I actually want to, I've never said this, especially because I know so many therapists and so many therapists have like expressed that this is what they want to do, that I'm like, I'm just gonna keep quiet because I am an actor. What do I know? But there was a time that I wanted to be a sex education person, like a sexual counselor, a sexual therapist. Um,
It's not
I
to,
find it to be really interesting.
but it's much needed, because we need to break down those stigmas of being a sexual being, because we all are.
Yeah.
That would be nice to have more people talk about it openly, and actually have people visiting schools and doing talks like that. That would be great.
Yeah. There's two people that I'm gonna throw their names out there. Um, One person is Irene Lipoff. She's got many books about human sexuality out there. Highly recommend them. Um, but I follow this woman on Instagram. Her name is Janelle, and her Instagram is at love with Janelle, I believe. And I really enjoy her Instagram. Uh, she posts a lot of things about sex and sexuality while partnered, while single, all of those things. And it's a very fresh take on sexuality. So I invite you all to check out Love with Janelle.
All we're saying here: no filters, no fears. Let your freak flag fly, but safely. That's it. Just do it safely, and always have consent words, and safe words. I meant to say, but yes, consent matters. And just, we only got one life, man. But you gotta live it well. You gotta live it healthy. And
Yeah.
like Vanessa said, to enjoy it, you gotta go get those tests done. And that's all we gotta say for
And
that.
educate yourselves when it comes to gender. Do educate yourselves, because now is the time to be able to change the narrative of what is normalized versus what isn't. Let's not lose that opportunity and let history repeat itself, and the patterns of shaming men, women for their bodies or sexualizing them continue to be a thing. It doesn't have to be anymore.
Exactly.
That's it.
That's it. Stay fearless, everybody.
Stay fearless, fam.